Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMA LOT. And this week, we're going to be going over UFC 237, which goes down in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, headlined by a women's title fight in Jessica Andrade against the returning champion, Rose Namajunas, as she comes back after defeating Ioane and Jacek for a second time. As you guys have noticed, you guys obviously won't be able to see my beautiful mug as always. I'm going to be recording strictly an audio version this time around. I'm in beautiful St. Gregor, Saskatchewan, visiting my girlfriend's parents, but I still got to get some content out for you guys, so here I am recording for you guys nonetheless. I could not skip an event like UFC 237, which seems to be quite top-heavy on first look, but if you guys go through the card throughout it, there's some great fights sprinkled throughout it, some names, some up-and-comers. I'm very excited for it overall. But let's just quickly recap our last event, which was UFC Ottawa, which went down this past Saturday when we had Cowboy Raoni headlining against Ally Quinta, and it was a very profitable night for us. I was very happy with my run there. You know, the last couple of events before that was a little bit of slump, had me in a little bit of a slump and had me quite demoralized. But I came up with a little bit more of a strategy, something to tinker with the current process that I use for making bets. It's only been the first event and it kind of paid off already. I finished with a 45% return on investment, so that's a great sign. And I look forward to continuing to implement this new strategy and ways for me to, capitalize on some of these lines that I would always look past in the future. For those unfamiliar, my lock of the night strategy is always finding that one or two plays that I can hammer with 5 units, and then my dog of the night plays, which is sprinkling between 1 to 2.5-ish units on a dog play that I'm very intrigued by. But now I'm adding in, slight favorites and underdogs that I'm not technically calling a dog of the night, parlays and all that. But this time around, it really paid off. And we'll just quickly recap it before we get into UFC 237. So we had, first and foremost, we'll go over my lock of the night play. I had one lock of the night play, which was Andrew Sanchez versus Marc-Andre Barriault. It was a 5-unit play at minus 161. Very happy with the performance that I got from Andrew Sanchez. It was a little bit closer than it should have been. However, he really showed in that third round that he just wanted it really, really bad. And, he never let go of that single. You can say what you want about him stalling, but he was controlling the fight. Marc-Andre wasn't able to get off, these crazy shots. Andre really had a lot of success in that second round. But in the third round, Andrew Sanchez really knew that he had to put it on. Marc-Andre Barriault did not let him breathe at all, and was able to grind out the decision victory, which is kind of what I thought he would do. Just, not as close as it was, unfortunately. So it had me sweating a little bit, but at the end of the day, the lock of the night play cashes. 5 units for 3.11 units with a 62% ROI there. And then I had a bunch of other plays. We'll get into my dog of the night play, which was Derek Brunson, 1 unit at plus 100. That cashes. Elias Theodorou always comes into these fights with this weird style of, kind of just shadow throwing 101. I talked to one of his coaches one of his former coaches, I should say, and he was kind of mystified at the type of striking style that Elias was kind of presenting in his last couple of fights. But Elias has kind of admitted it himself. It's only going to work against certain fighters, but once you really start fighting these upper echelon guys like Derek Brunson, that type of shit's not going to fly around here. So big win for Derek Brunson here. Big cash for us as well as a dog of the night play, 1 unit for a profit of 1 unit. And then I had a super small dog of the night play, a 0.25 unit poke, if you want to call it that, on Sarah Moraes to win by sub over Macy Chiasson. At the end of that first round, it was very close. I thought we almost had that in the bag, and if maybe Sarah Moraes had 10 more seconds, she was going to pull off that armbar. However, Macy Chiasson survives, and then we get a complete demolition in that second round, which is what I thought the fight was going to be for Macy Chiasson from the get-go. But, there was that slight chance that Sarah Moraes was going to be able to latch on some sort of submission. So a 0.25 unit risk on a plus 1325 prop was just a no-brainer for me, and I would make that bet every single time, no matter what. So that's minus 0.25 units there. And then we move on to my regular plays. Like, I have no real classification for these plays. They're more so just value plays, or whatever you want to call them. I like to just call them normal, regular plays. The first of which was Merab Dvalishvili, 1.7 units at minus 163 against Brad Katona, undefeated Canadian, coming here. But this was a very tough matchup in Merab Dvalishvili. People can say what they want about Merab's technique and his striking, but the pace that this man sets and his ability to chain wrestle and go from one martial art to the next in an MMA fight is just insane. I said it in the last episode where I was saying that Merab Dvalishvili is probably the best fighter to ever have an 8-4 record. I think the ceiling is very high for him, especially with the pace that he sets. And I think that this Brad Katona win was a very big feather in his cap. There's a lot of hype coming around Brad Katona. A lot of people thought that he would be able to get up from any type of takedown that Merab was able to land. They thought that he was going to outstrike Merab. They thought he was going to submit Merab. But Merab showed the fuck up, and he did what he had to do, and he got the W here with that pace and that wrestling and that grinding style. And in the last episode, I said that I was thinking of going 5 units deep on Dvalishvili and making it my lock of the night play. However, I backpedaled a little bit. Maybe it was me drinking a little bit of the juice that a lot of people were putting out there in terms of Brad Katona. However, I still ended up making the play 1.7 units, and I ended up cashing for 1.04 units. So I'm happy that I made the play regardless, got the money that I wanted on that, and I'm happy there. Another play that I had, which ended up being a loser, was Juan Adams and Arjun Buller to not go to a decision. I bet 2 units at minus 125. I said this as soon as the fight finished. My only regret about this bet was the fact that I went 2 units deep and not just 1 unit deep. At the beginning of the week, I really thought I was going to be able to get plus money on this prop. However, it stayed roughly at a pick'em. Minus 125 is what I ended up settling on, and for some reason I decided to go 2 units deep to make up for the fact that I didn't get plus money on it. And that's just a lesson that I got to learn. It's unfortunate that it was a 2-unit loss. However, it didn't play too much of a detriment into the rest of the profits for the night. So, silver lining there, if you want to call it that. But I wish I went 1 unit instead of 2 units. But regardless, it is an L. I was expecting, if it were to go past the first round, that Arjun Buller was going to be able to gain top control and either submit or pound out Juan Adams, who has always had a suspect gas tank. But Juan Adams ends up surviving. Arjun Buller just grinds it out and gets the decision victory there. Lastly, my last play was a parlay, which was a 2.5 unit stab at plus 108. I'm not going to call it a stab because 2.5 units is not a stab. 2.5 units at plus 108 for a parlay of Shane Burgos and Nordine Taleb and Shane Burgos. I'm not going to lie, I have yet to see the Nordine Taleb fight, but I was expecting him to win a decision, and that's exactly the scorecards that we got. With Shane Burgos, completely outclassed Cub Swanson. He looked very good. There were a couple good moments for Cub Swanson, but they came few and far between. And those between moments was when Shane Burgos was really able to work his reach, his leg kicks, his swift jab, beautiful combinations he was able to land on a veteran like Cub Swanson. And it shows that he has a continuously growing ceiling, and Shane Burgos is going to be a problem. That Calvin Kattar loss is just a bump in the road for him, but I think he has a lot of potential and he can make a lot of big waves in this division. So I'm very excited to see how they match up Shane Burgos next. With that said, that's UFC Ottawa. So we ended up profiting 5.60 units for a 45% return on investment. Very happy with the performance there. Very happy to finally get out of that mini slump that I was in over the last 2 events. But that just moves us right the fuck along to UFC 237 again, which goes down this weekend in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, headlined by a huge strawweight title fight in Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade. This is a fight that a lot of people have been calling for. A lot of people were thinking that Jessica Andrade probably even deserved this fight before her last fight run, which was against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. However, we all know everything that Rose was going through mentally. So Jessica Andrade didn't want to just sit on the bench and wait for the title shot. She ended up going out there, KOing Karolina Kowalkiewicz in her last fight. So that was very impressive on Andrade's part, and it continues to grow the intimidation or the perception that people have of Jessica Andrade of being this absolute monster, aka the female John Lineker, if you want to call her that. But yeah, again, like I said, this card is pretty much sprinkled with a lot of good talent. We have the return of Anderson Silva once again. He just fought in February against Sergio Adesanya. He's coming back to fight the killer gorilla Jared Cannonier. Jose Aldo makes his return against Alexander Volkanovski, and what could potentially be a number one contender fight for Volkanovski here. Nobody really wants to see Aldo get whooped by Holloway for a third time. So with a win here for Aldo, I'm not sure what he really does. Maybe he can go up to the lightweight division and stake a claim for a title shot there, but we just don't know. And then again, like the rest of the card, Thiago Alves, Diego Ferreira against Francisco Trinaldo. That's a great fight. Ryan Spann coming in against Antonio Rogerio Nogueira in enemy territory. Kurt Holobaugh against Thiago Moises, great fight. Irene Aldana versus Bethe, which has been a fight that's been booked a couple times, I believe, and is finally going down this weekend. The return of the prodigy BJ Penn against Clay Guida. Not much to say about that fight in terms of quick thoughts. What else we got? Priscila Cachoeira, the zombie girl, against a UFC newcomer who just performed on Dana White's Contender Series. And then we got Sergio Moraes versus Warlley, always way down there on the card, and Raoni Barcelos, who is another very, very promising prospect that a lot of people are high on. Unfortunate that his opponent Said Nurmagomedov fell out, but we're glad to still see him be a part of this card. So let's just kick this shit off. I already have, if you guys have been following me on Twitter at MMA Lock-Cast, you guys already see that I have 3 bets locked in for this weekend already for UFC 237. And I'll tell you guys about them a little bit more as I get into this card. So let's just kick things off right off the bat with Talita Bernardo against Melissa Gatto. The odds are currently sitting at, Talita Bernardo is a heavy favorite. Minus 460 for her, while the comeback on Melissa Gatto is plus 328. I looked up a little bit on Melissa Gatto's fights. We have everything pretty much on the tape index, so make sure you guys check that out on Newsom's website once you guys finish listening to this podcast. That is everything that you need for a betting perspective, and all the prep that you guys need. We take it out of your hands, and everything is just one click away. So make sure you guys check it out on the tape index. With that said, Melissa Gatto in her last fight against Caroline Rosa, even though she got the Kimura victory there in the first round, it seemed very dicey, and it seems like she's going to have a lot of trouble with girls that are able to stay out of submissions, but also implement a very heavy grappling game, which is exactly what Talita Bernardo brings to the table. I'm not surprised to see Talita Bernardo as such a heavy favorite, especially against a girl that's an undefeated prospect. Melissa Gatto is 5-0-2, so undefeated. But Talita Bernardo is definitely the more UFC tested fighter here. She's coming off a victory over Sarah Moraes, which is a prime example of a fight where she showed that she's able to grind her opponents out without getting submitted. And we know that Sarah Moraes has a decent jiu-jitsu game, definitely something that I would rate even higher than Melissa Gatto's jiu-jitsu. So nothing to get too deep into here. Melissa Gatto, mainly a striker, even though she was able to pull off a submission in her last fight. I still got Talita Bernardo here. I think that she's going to be able to grind this out and get the decision victory over Melissa Gatto. Moving right along, we got Raoni Barcelos against a UFC newcomer and a short notice opponent in Carlos Huachin, a Peruvian fighter with the 10-3-2 record. He is currently on a very impressive 7-fight unbeaten streak. We got a draw sprinkled in there against Rodrigo Vera, his third last fight. But his last 2 fights have not gone that long at all. He knocked out Marcelino Cavalcante in his last fight, roughly 3 minutes into the first round, and then before that was able to knock out Andrine Dalla 3 minutes into that first round. So he's a very heavy-handed Peruvian, but that's kind of where it ends. There's a lot of speculation that you can really put into his opponents, especially if you guys are looking at the Tapology pages for these guys, and obviously the tape too. Like, you can see it that a guy like Marcelino Cavalcante, who's 10-8-1, is that really the type of fight that you want before you get into the UFC? Like, when you think of certain guys that come into the UFC or even Dana White Contender Series fighting some of these guys with very sketchy records, we get guys like Jordan Wright, I think that was his name, the ultimate can crusher. So anytime he's fought anybody with a decent record, he's gone to a draw. Against Rodrigo Vera, who was 6-0 going into that fight, and then Ahmet Keiretli, who was 4-1, ended up beating our man Carlos by decision. So Hani Barcelos, highly touted, very entertaining fighter. That fight against Holobaugh was an absolute war, and then that finishing sequence with the uppercuts was just a thing of beauty against Holobaugh. So I was very happy to see Hani Barcelos get the victory there. And then in the Chris Gutierrez fight, that got dicey a little bit when Gutierrez was able to cut Hani Barcelos, and it was like something out of a horror movie. It just looked insane how much blood was pouring out of Hani Barcelos' face. However, regardless, Hani was able to get the rear naked choke with a minute left in that second round and continue to show his dominance, and why he is so highly touted by most fighters. He's fought a lot of guys that are in the UFC already, like even before he was in the UFC himself. He's beaten guys like Tyler Toner, Bobby Moffitt, and Dan Moret way back in his RFA days. And now he's coming off of 2 victories over Kurt Holobaugh and Chris Gutierrez. I love his striking. He's shown that he has a great jiu-jitsu game as well. And I think this fight against Carl Huachin is going to be a bit of a walk in the park for him. I'm not surprised to see him as such a big favorite, minus 531-ish, which is crazy. But I have a very keen interest in potentially parlaying him with somebody else on this card for a small play. So make sure you guys, maybe I'll hint at it later in this podcast when I get to that matchup that I'm talking about. But I won't be mad to see people parlaying Hani Barcelos here. He's very deserving of being a parlay piece, even up to that minus 500, minus 600 range. I said that, girls like Angela Hill and Macy Kiasen probably weren't deserving of a minus 600, minus 700 parlay piece spot, but Hani Barcelos is one of those guys that I actually trust in those spots. So I'm going to take Barcelos here by probably first round submission. I think that he's going to do his work on the feet, end up rocking our man Carlos, and then eventually getting the submission, probably RNC near the end of the first round. Let's move right along to another interesting matchup here with 2 Brazilians facing off against each other. We got Sergio Moraes against Warlley Alves. Starting off with Sergio Moraes, he's coming off a decision loss to Anthony Martin, or I'm going to call him Tony Martin because, again, if you guys have been listening before, you're not changing your name halfway through being in the UFC. So our man Tony Martin ended up getting the decision victory over Sergio Moraes, who, Sergio Moraes could not get the fight to the ground. Tony Martin was able to pick him apart on the feet. Sergio Moraes is not the greatest stand-up fighter out there. Obviously, he's known for his jiu-jitsu, which kind of allows him to throw with reckless abandon on the feet. He's not the most polished and technical striker, but he's able to land some of these weighing shots because he doesn't care if he leaves himself open for a takedown. If somebody wants to take him down, go for it. He is begging you to take him down. So I think in this Warlley Alves fight, we're going to see Warlley it's going to be interesting because Warlley likes to throw with heat. But if he throws with heat, he's leaving himself open for a takedown. So I could see Sergio Moraes, waiting for one of those big spurts from Warlley Alves, and then eventually ducking under for a double leg takedown and getting the fight to the ground. And then, working his jiu-jitsu game, just as we saw him work his jiu-jitsu game against Ben Saunders, who's highly accredited BJJ black belt as well. So I was very intrigued to see Warlley Alves as the favorite when the odds initially dropped, and he's still a bit of a favorite. Wow, Sergio Moraes is up to plus 128. That's insane. God damn. So I did end up playing Sergio Moraes as a dog of the night play at 1 unit at plus 120. I'm surprised that the line is as wide or is getting wider than what I had initially bet him at. But people keep drinking that Warlley Alves Kool-Aid. Especially that fight against James Krause. Everybody thought that Warlley was a shoo-in, and a lot of people were kind of just using Warlley as a parlay piece at that minus 300 price range he was at against James Krause. But James Krause does the damn thing, ends up finishing Warlley Alves in the second round, and now here we are with him against Sergio Moraes. I was one of those guys that was buying the Warlley Alves hype back in the day, when he was beating guys like Alan Jouban and Nordine Taleb, and then he ran into Brian Barberena, which was a big one for Barberena. Kamaru Usman after that. And then he goes on a 2-fight winning streak against Salim Tahari and Sultan Aliyev, and then runs into James Krause, which was another finish loss for him. I think that was his first ever, loss via finish. So in this fight against Sergio Moraes, I think it could be another loss for him via finish. I think that Sergio Moraes is gonna find his chances to get this fight to the ground, whether it's throwing heavy on the feet and then eventually tripping Warlley Alves, or rocking him and then getting him to the ground, taking his back and choking him out. But I think there is a lot of value on Sergio Moraes this year. Again, I'm very surprised that the line is continuing to widen as well. So if you guys want, just wait it out another day or two or something and see where this line actually goes. But I think there's plenty of value, which is at that plus 120 range, which is where I already bet him at for 1 unit. So I'm taking Sergio Moraes by second round submission. I wouldn't even be surprised to see it to go to the third round. But another thing that would be very interesting is to see the fight doesn't go to decision prop, which seems to have just dropped. So fight doesn't go to decision is plus 125. Interesting, very interesting. I might have to take a little peep at that afterwards. It's funny that the fight doesn't go to decision prop. Always seems to drop as soon as I record the podcast, so I don't really have much time to digest what these lines are like or what they're looking like. So maybe you guys can just see my live reactions to seeing some of these fights doesn't go to decision props. Let's see what that Barcelos one is at. Honey Barcelos fight doesn't go to decision minus 260. All right, a little bit too much juice, but I could definitely see that. Talita Bernardo against Melissa Gatto plus 180 fight doesn't go to decision. I get that. All right, yeah. So my official play on that and pick is going to be Sergio Moraes. I got him 1 unit at plus 120. Make sure you guys hit that. Wait on it a little bit to see if it widens even more, but I'd be very surprised to see it get even worse than or get better than plus 130. So value city at plus money for Sergio Moraes. Next up, we got Priscila Cachoeira against Luana Carolina. Luana Carolina is 5-1. She's coming off a victory over Mabeli Lima in her last fighting on the Contender Series for the Brazilian, whatever they want to call it, the Brazilian Series, Dana White's Contenders Brazilian Series, Brazilian Edition, whatever the fuck they want to call it. They had 3 episodes last year where they did 5 fights on each cards, simply all Brazilians. So, Luana Carolina was one of those fights there, and it was a very underwhelming victory. I'm very surprised that she's coming straight to the UFC after a fight like that. She was kind of getting grinded out by a girl that was way smaller than her, probably more stronger, which makes a little bit of sense there. But I was not impressed with her at all. She seems like mainly a striker, not the most aggressive striker either there. So in this fight against Priscila Cachoeira, I think it's just going to be 2 dogs going at each other. And I understand why. Wow, I'm surprised that Carolina is such a minus 162 to plus 148 to Priscila Cachoeira. I think this is a fight that could go either way, and that line is a little wide if I'm being completely honest. So I might dig a little bit deeper on that fight with Priscila Cachoeira. She's not the greatest fighter either, but she does have a good knack for moving forward and throwing heavy punches. She's a little slow with it, so Luana Carolina might be able to catch her with a little bit more crisp technique. But with Priscilla's forward movement and how tough she is, I think she could walk through anything that Luana is able to throw at her. As long as Luana doesn't really knock her out, I think Priscila Cachoeira has a good chance of kind of overwhelming Luana Carolina here. So I'm gonna pick the dog here in Priscila Cachoeira. Probably not a bet, but don't be surprised if you guys see me eventually warm up to it a little bit more as a bet throughout this week. But as of right now, no bet. But I'm gonna pick the underdog here in Priscila Cachoeira via decision. Let's say decision. Next up, we got Clay Guida versus BJ Penn. This fight is happening for who the fuck knows. Should not be happening, period. BJ Penn should be long gone, should be cut. Surprised with all the domestic abuse allegations and everything that's going on with BJ Penn. I'm surprised that he's still in the UFC and the UFC is allowing him to fight this weekend. But it is what it is. Greg Hardy's co-main eventing fights that are on ESPN, so the UFC is going to do what the UFC fucking does. But with this fight, if you guys have been paying attention, it is a part of my lock of the night play. So we'll start off with on the losing end, which is BJ Penn. He hasn't been fighting that much. It's crazy that a guy with a record of 16, 13, and 2 is still considered one of the greatest fighters of all time. He's clearly fighting way past his prime, and it's unfortunate as to why he continues to fight way past his prime. He is on a 6-fight losing streak, 7 fights without a win. You know, that first out of those 7 fights was against John Fitch. And that was actually a draw at UFC 127, which went down in Australia, from what I remember. And before that, he knocked out Matt Hughes in 2010. So if you fight Matt Hughes in 2010 and you knock him out in 21 seconds, it's not something to be super proud of. But let's just quickly go over a couple of the names that he's lost to since his draw to John Fitch. He dropped a decision to Nick Diaz. He dropped a decision to Rory McDonald. He lost to Frankie Edgar in the 3rd round way back in July of 2014. He came back in January of 2017 and lost via head kick and punches to Yair Rodriguez. After that, he lost a decision to Dennis Seaver. And then after that, which was way back at UFC 232 in December of this past year, he lost via a beautiful heel hook submission by Ryan Hall. You know, if most of you remember, it was like a rolling heel hook. He was able to catch BJ Penn in. And if you're catching BJ motherfucking Penn in a rolling heel hook, you know that you should be gone. Like, BJ Penn should not be fighting. But here he is fighting Clay Guida at UFC 237. I don't expect to see a better BJ Penn. I expect to see a slow, not the greatest jiu-jitsu BJ Penn. I expect Clay Guida to run circles around him. I expect Clay Guida to beat him up on the feet. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Clay Guida get like a 2nd-round finish here, even if it's just overwhelming him with punches against the cage. Even if this fight gets to the ground and Clay Guida wants to work on top, I can see him, kind of passing BJ Penn's guard, and I can see him doing heavy damage from on top. But BJ Penn is clearly just in this for the paycheck at this point, and it's very unfortunate to see a legend like that fall from grace, especially with all the domestic abuse allegations that are going on around of him. The restraining order that's against him as well. So it's very disheartening, but at least we get to see him get his ass beat by Clay Guida here. So Clay Guida is actually the first leg of my Lock of the Night parlay, which is going to be capped off by the next fight. Also, I'm going to take Clay Guida by 2nd-round TKO. Like I said, my Lock of the Night plays extends to this next fight, which is Irene Aldana against Bethe Correira. I got Irene Aldana as the 2nd leg of my Lock of the Night parlay. I think she is going to have absolute success in this fight against Bethe Correira. Bethe Correira is 10-3-1. She is coming off a KO loss to Holly Holm way back in June of 2017. So she's had a fair amount of time off. She's closing in on 2 years of, she'll be a month shy of 2 years from the last time she fought. She was actually scheduled to fight Irene Aldana way back in August of 2018. However, she had to pull out. I believe there was a neck injury of some sort that had her pulled out. So it's unfortunate that she has to come back from such a devastating injury against a girl like Irene Aldana, who is obviously the way better striker, is going to have a significant reach advantage, and has great footwork, has a great sense of range, keeping her range with her jab and her kicks. And Bethe Correira I'm surprised that she was able to get a split decision victory over Jessica Ai, which is mind-blowing to me. And then goes to a draw with Marion Renault, which is a fight that I believe I bet Renault in. So glad that it ended up turning into a push because it was a draw. But then, her next fight against Holly Holm, I think I went balls deep on Holly Holm here, who was a very heavy favorite, but I expected her to win inside the distance, and she did. But yeah, now we have Bethe Correira against Irene Aldana. I think Bethe Correira is going to have a lot of issues trying to close the distance and land big shots. I don't know how well she's going to be able to engage in the clinch, but even if she's able to clinch Irene Aldana here, I don't think she'll have much success getting Irene Aldana down. So I see Aldana having plenty of success just picking apart Bethe Correira on the feet and running away with the decision. One thing I will give Bethe Correira is her toughness. She is able to, take a lot of damage. That Holly Holm knockout was a weird knockout, but I don't expect Irene Aldana to pack that much power in her kicks as Holly Holm per se. So I'm taking Aldana by decision here, and that will cap off our Lock of the Night play, which is again Clay Guida and Irene Aldana. I parlayed them together from minus 142, so I think that's a great price considering that we got Andrew Sanchez at minus 161. So if I hope both of these fighters are able to roll here and we're able to secure that lock of the night money, because that would be very good. Moving right along, we got Thiago Moises against Kurt Holobaugh. This should be a great fight. I'm very intrigued with how this fight's going to play out. In terms of the odds, we got Thiago Moises currently sitting around minus 140 with Kurt Holobaugh at a plus 120 underdog price. Thiago Moises, very good jiu-jitsu player, has shown that he has knockout power in his punches and his kicks, especially in that fight against Gladson Cutis in the Dana White Contender Series fight. Had a lot of success there, showed a lot that he had to offer on the feet. In the Beneil Dariush fight, I did bet Thiago Moises in the spot, and I thought that he was going to have some success landing on Beneil Dariush and then eventually put Dariush out. Unfortunately, he was not able to. Dariush, stuck to the game plan. His chin held up, and he was able to get the victory via decision in that fight. I think, Kurt Holobaugh is going to be a little bit more engaging on the feet, might, put himself out there and put himself in danger a little bit more against Thiago Moises. So it's really going to come down to whose chin is able to hold up more. This is a fight that I would be interested in seeing. The fight doesn't go to decision prop, which is at minus 125. So this is a fight that I could definitely see not going to a decision at minus 125. That's in a very intriguing spot. So I might look into playing that. But I don't know who to play, man. Like, you obviously got to get the ground game to Thiago Moises if it gets there, but Kurt Holobaugh does a decent job of keeping the fight on the feet. Jeez, this one's a tough one. I am going to side with Moises here, just given the fact that he has more advantages all around. Even though I think that this fight could probably stay on the feet for the most part, I still got to go with Thiago Moises. Excuse me. But I think that he, with his advantages all over in the fight, he is definitely maybe not a bet, but he definitely has the attributes to win this fight more so than Kurt Holobaugh, who is always just seen as more of like a slugger, brawler, stand-up fighter. It's going to be. We like Khalil Rountree, for example. We've seen these guys make massive leaps and improvements in between fights, but Kurt Holobaugh doesn't seem the type of guy that would make that type of improvement in between fights. Then again, neither did Khalil Rountree. So who knows what to expect in this fight. It's a fight that I'll personally stay away from, other than maybe the fight doesn't go to decision prop. That's something that I'm interested in. But as a pick, since that's what you guys are listening for, I'm going to take Thiago Moises to win by second round submission. Next up, we got Antonio Rogerio Nogueira against Ryan Spann. Lil Nog coming back to the UFC after knocking out Sam Alvey. When the hell was that one? I feel like that was earlier this year. Lost a lot of people money, I know that for sure. This was actually in September of this past year. He was able to knock out Sam Alvey 1 minute into the second round in a fight where, it was stylistically a very good fight for Nogueira. However, we knew that the only issue there would have been the chin. So Nogueira came in here as a plus 310 underdog. Everybody and their mother thought that Sam Alvey was going to knock out Nogueira. Unfortunately, Nogueira was able to land the better shots, especially against a very one-dimensional Sam Alvey, who just likes to throw those big haymakers, and if he's not able to land them, he kind of just wilts and just backs up and backs up and backs up and throws another huge shot. But that's you can't bank on that, especially against a guy in Nogueira who, has, decent boxing at the 205 weight class. He was, I believe he was part of the national boxing team for Brazil. But his issue has always been his chin. Like if you're able to land on the button, he's going to go out. And a lot of people thought that Sam Alvey was going to be able to accomplish that way back in September. Unfortunately, he wasn't. Nogueira was able to find the button and put Sam Alvey out. But I think this is going to be a short-lived comeback for Nogueira. In a fight against Ryan Spann, this guy Ryan Spann has seen pretty much it all. Like, he's 15-5. That's 20 fights deep into his pro MMA career. He's had 2 fights on the Dana White Contender Series. The first one against Carl Robertson did not last long enough for us to see really what he was capable of. He got finished with an elbow 15 seconds into the first round. But since then, he's able to put together 5 straight victories. One of them being a 26-second guillotine choke over Emiliano Sordi on the Dana White Contender Series. And then after that, he was able to finally make his UFC debut against Luis Enrique, who was debuting at 205 at the time. And he was able to grind out Enrique there. You know, he's a very powerful guy. He's going to have the size advantage here and power advantage against Nogueira, in my opinion. But if he stands on the feet for too long and stands in front of Nogueira, I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Nogueira land some shots on Ryan Spann. However, I do think that we're going to see the longer, leaner Ryan Spann moving around a little bit more, using his footwork to make it harder for Nogueira to land a good shot. You know, Nogueira's at 42. He is the slower fighter here, clearly going to be the slower fighter, and will be giving up a lot of strength against Ryan Spann here. So I think that we could see a finish for Ryan Spann, maybe a takedown and a ground and pound kind of finish. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see Ryan Spann land a big shot on the feet, maybe a head kick of some sort to put Nogueira on Queer Street and then eventually put him out. Also, I'm going to say Queer Street. I don't give a shit. I know a lot of people are starting to move away from that term, but it's a term that combat sports have used for time and time and time, and I'm just going to continue to use it. Just screw you guys. But either way, I'm taking Ryan Spann by first round knockout. I think his 6.5 reach advantage, as well as a 3-inch height advantage, is going to play a huge role here. And we're going to see this youngster, a 27-year-old, and Ryan Spann get the biggest name under his belt in a low nog victory. So Ryan Spann, first round KO. Let's move along to, actually, you know what? Let's see what the fight doesn't go to decision odds are on that too. Minus 285. So a little bit of juice there. Let's see, Ryan Spann inside the distance, plus 104. Maybe a little poke there. Something to bring to your attention, if I must say. But yeah, regardless, I'm taking Ryan Spann by first round KO. Next up is a great fight. These two may not have the biggest names in the UFC, but everybody who knows and is an MMA nut, just as I am, know that this will be a very fun fight. Francisco Trinaldo against Diego Ferreira. Starting off with Diego Ferreira. Carlos Diego Ferreira. I'm not sure why he dropped the Carlos. But Ferreira is coming off a victory over Rustam Khabilov in their last fight way back in February. He was able to, pretty much outstrike Rustam Khabilov. A lot of people know that Rustam's game is predicated mainly on a grappling approach, trying to get these guys to the ground, grind on them, slam them, do what they need to do to squeeze out a decision victory. However, Diego Ferreira was able to stifle that and eventually, pick apart Rustam Khabilov on the feet and get the victory there. So very impressive win for Diego Ferreira there, especially coming off that Kyle Nelson finish, even though he was supposed to fight John McDessie. John McDessie pulled out. Jesse Ronson came in. He had to pull out. And then Kyle Nelson came in, I believe, on 3 or 4 days' notice. Put up a decent fight. However, the experience difference definitely showed here. Or I should say the UFC experience showed here. And Diego Ferreira was able to get the finish over Kyle Nelson there. In this fight against Francisco Trinaldo, I think he's still going to have the striking advantage and maybe even the speed advantage here. But one thing that Francisco Trinaldo does well is pack a lot of heat in his punches and his strikes, especially to the body. So I'm intrigued to see how Trinaldo is able to going to be able to mix in his body work as well as his imposing frame against the Diego Ferreira, who showed very good footwork, a lot of good striking. He's really good at jiu-jitsu too, so if this fight is able to get to the ground, I think he should be able to hold his own. But Trinaldo is just so strong, heavy, and just packs so much power in his punches. But another elder, if you guys want to call it that, 40 years old, Francisco Trinaldo, doing the damn thing against Evan Dunham last time around in September, where he finished Evan Dunham with a knee to the liver and then eventually pounded him out there. Trinaldo's had a couple fights booked for himself. He was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev, and then he was supposed to also fight Alexander Hernandez, but both of those fights fell through, and now he's coming back to fight Diego Ferreira. So I want to take Trinaldo here because I've always been a fan of him, and I believe I took the fight doesn't go to decision against Evan Dunham, but this is another fight I would actually be interested in seeing what the fight doesn't go to decision looks like. Let's see. Plus 170. So maybe another underdog fight doesn't go to decision bet there. That's very intriguing. But I'm gonna go with I want to pick Trinaldo, but Ferreira just looks so good. So don't be surprised if you do see an underdog bet from me on Francisco Trinaldo, but it's something that I'm going to have to ponder throughout the week. I will go with Diego Ferreira as my pick. I think that his his youth, his footwork, his striking. I think he's going to be able to stay away from the heavy shots of Francisco Trinaldo, and I think that he's going to be able to put on a bit of a striking clinic against Trinaldo here. So I'm going to take Ferreira by probably by third round TKO. We know how much Francisco Trinaldo likes to suck wind at the end of the fights, and I think that's where Diego Ferreira might be able to put it on him a little bit more and eventually get the finish there. So I'm taking Diego Ferreira, third round TKO or submission, but third round finish for Diego Ferreira. Next up, we got the Pitbull Thiago Alves against Laureano Staropoli. Thiago Alves is coming off a split decision victory over Max Griffin in his last fight back at the beginning of February of this year. Before that, he had a very competitive fight in a guy in Alexei Kunchenko who was very highly touted, 18-0 going into that fight. And then before that, he got knocked out by Curtis Millender via knee in the second round. So he has gained a little bit of momentum, coming into this fight against Staropoli after that victory over Max Griffin. And he definitely has the experience advantage over a guy like Staropoli, who this will only be his 10th fight and only his second fight in the UFC. This will be a huge jump up in competition after Staropoli was able to get a decision victory over Hector Aldana last time around in his native land of Argentina. But Thiago Alves, this is a different animal. This is a guy that, if you want to stay on the feet, which is where I think Laureano Staropoli does, he better, mind his P's and Q's and make sure he's very disciplined when he fights Thiago Alves, because Thiago Alves will find those holes, especially in a young fighter like Staropoli, and I think he'll make it a tough fight for Thiago Alves. We know Thiago Alves has a lot of success in the clinch, very heavy leg kicks. We don't know if this Max Griffin win is something that's going to light a fire under him and show him that he's able to still get victories this late into his career. I want to say late, but he's 35. He fought George St. Pierre for the title way back in 2009. At UFC 100. So since then, he's had a bit of a tumultuous path. A loss to John Fitch, a win over John Howard, lost to Rick Story, win over Papi Abedi, lost to Martin Kampmann, beat Seth Baczynski and Jordan Meehan, lost to Carlos Condit and Jim Miller, beat Patrick Cote, lost to Curtis Millender and Alexei Kunchenko, and then just beat Max Griffin last time around. So it's been a very up and down path for him. It's like 2 wins, 1 loss, 1 win, 2 losses. It's unfortunate, but I think he has a very winnable matchup here in front of him against Laureano Staropoli. The odds currently sitting at, they're pretty much even. So maybe a small Thiago Alves play might be something to think about. Currently, the best price you can get on him is -102 on Sportbet, while the comeback on Laureano Staropoli is going to be -112. Oh man. I'm going to go with Thiago Alves here, man. I think there is some value on him. This fight being in Brazil, him fighting, maybe it might be a little bit more of a closer matchup if it eventually stays on the feet. But I like Thiago Alves here. Staropoli, I did bang on him a little bit because I did bet Hector Aldana last time around. I wasn't impressed with his level of competition. And say what you want about Hector Aldana, he is still 6 or 7 fights deep into his career, but huge experience jump here with Staropoli fighting Thiago Alves, and I think that might play a huge factor into this fight. So I'm going to go with Thiago Alves by decision. I think he outstrikes the youngster, makes it a gritty fight, does some work in the clinch, but eventually comes out with a decision victory. Thiago Alves. Next up, the 3 big fights. This is why I called it a top-heavy card. We got 3 huge fights to cap off the card. First of which, Alexander Volkanovski against Jose Aldo. Alexander Volkanovski is probably one of my favorite up-and-coming fighters. His style, his pressure, very entertaining fights. It's always like a one-way street whenever he's fighting. He's always able to implement his will against these guys and dictate where this fight goes. He has a strong grappling game, but he also has very heavy strikes that he likes to use to come forward and close the distance with. His fight against Chad Mendes was just a thing of beauty. He did get dropped one time by Chad Mendes, was able to recover his senses, get back to the feet, and then implement his own striking and eventually rocking, dropping, and finishing Chad Mendes himself in the same round. That was just insane. That was one of the more impressive fights that card. The fight before that, a lot of people thought that he was going to be able to finish Darren Elkins. Elkins is just a freaking mummy, man. It's insane how much damage that guy is able to take and still keep coming forward. However, Alexander was able to still pull out a very decisive decision victory there against Darren Elkins. Like I said at the top of the show, this is a number one title contender fight for Alexander Volkanovski. If he's able to get the victory here, it's hard to deny him a title shot against Max Holloway. It's a very tough task for him to go up against a guy like Jose Aldo, who seems to have found his fire again. He hasn't been finishing guys in a long time. So he's coming off of 2 finishes over Jeremy Stephens and Renato Moicano. Before that, let's see, the last time he finished somebody was the Chan Sung Jung fight, which was in August of 2013. But if most of you remember, Korean Zombie actually blew out or dislocated his shoulder in that fight, and it was very visible. And I think that is what really made that fight actually come to a stop, was more so Chan Sung Jung's shoulder injury more so than it was Jose Aldo's punches. And then before that, the last second knee against Chad Mendes, which was way back in January of 2012. So the main point being here, Jose Aldo hasn't really been known as a finisher as of late, especially during his UFC run. But now he's coming out, after 2 losses to Max Holloway, finishing Jeremy Stephens in the first round with a beautiful body punch, and then putting it on Renato Moicano, completely overwhelming him, and then finishing him in the second round. In this fight against Alexander Volkanovski, I think he's going to have a much tougher time of imposing his will. Renato Moicano is more of a counter striker, a way for you to strike, really use his distance and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. Whereas Alexander Volkanovski, he's more of a pressure you, put the pressure on you with punches, put the pressure on you with grappling and clinch work and stuff. I'm interested to see what Volkanovski's game plan is going to be here. Although he has a lot to offer in that first round and a half, but I think that if it gets past that round and a half, Volkanovski has a really good shot at possibly finishing Jose Aldo, or at least getting a 10-8 in that third round, and then hopefully winning that second round enough to get a decision victory here. I am going to lean with Alexander Volkanovski, who is the slate favorite at plus 125. I hinted at this earlier in the podcast, but I am thinking of parlaying Raoni, Barcelos, and Alexander Volkanovski for roughly around plus 200. I'm thinking of dropping 1 unit on that just to get to, I think there's good value there. Like, I want to bet on Alexander Volkanovski, but plus 125 really doesn't itch it for me as a straight pick. But if you throw Raoni, Barcelos in there, last time I checked, you could get roughly around plus 200. So I'm going to make sure that's still the case now that I've really finished up the tape study on both of these guys. And I think that Volkanovski offers that. He's not going to have the success that Max Holloway had, which was keeping the distance and letting Jose Aldo whiff on a lot of shots and then kind of tiring himself out. I think that he's going to have to go in there. He's going to have to eat a few shots, but the consistent power, body work, and grappling, relentlessness, if that's what you want to call it. I'm probably making up a word right there, but just that ability to grind and pressure on these guys. I think he has the ability to really stifle Jose Aldo's Muay Thai and striking prowess. So I'm going to take Alexander Volkanovski here. I think that I just think that it's really his time. He's 19-1. His only ever loss is coming way back in his 4th fight in the UFC, which is when he got, sorry, not in the UFC, but in his pro career. But since then, he's strung together so many victories, very impressive victories as well, especially that Chad Mendes one. But I think that Volkanovski is going to get this via decision, and that will set him up for a title shot. It hurts me to say that because I've been such a big fan of Jose Aldo, and I did cash a little bit on him when I bet him against Jeremy Stephens. But we all love to continue to count out Jose Aldo, but I think that this is the time where we count him out, and it actually happens. The interesting point here is also that Jose Aldo is the slight favorite. So there might be more money coming in on Volkanovski or Aldo. I'm really not sure how the public is really perceiving this matchup. But in terms of how I perceive it, I think that Volkanovski has all the tools to get a decision victory over Jose Aldo here and set him up for that shot against Max Holloway. So I'm going to take Alexander Volkanovski by decision. Next up, we got the co-main event. The return of Anderson the Spider Silva versus Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. It's very intriguing that Anderson Silva and Jose Aldo are fighting on the same card. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it would be, you couldn't even imagine the fact that the UFC is going to be able to put 2 superstars like these guys on the same card. But now, time has run its course, and Anderson Silva is 40, however many years old. Let's confirm how old he is. 44 years old. Jose Aldo, maybe a little bit of a resurgence in his career, but it's more so the fact that Anderson Silva, has a big name still, even though he has lost plenty of times. He has lost 5 out of his last 6 fights, and that one victory over Derek Brunson is very, very controversial. So he could just as easily be winless in his last 6 fights. But in he comes against Jared Cannonier, who was coming off a victory over David Branch, where he was able to fend off David Branch's grappling and takedown attempts in that first round, and then really put it on David Branch in that second round. It only took him 29 seconds to get David Branch out of there after he landed some big shots and followed up with some ground and pound. I'm interested to see if Anderson Silva's chin is going to be able to hold up here, because I think that Jared Cannonier is going to be able to land a lot of big shots. Silva showed a lot of promise in that fight against Israel Adesanya. It was a bit of a chess match, if you want to call it that. I think a lot of people were overblowing how entertaining it actually was. It was a good fight, but it's not like, I'm seeing some people saying it was like fight of the year candidate or something. I'm like, hold your horses. Just hold your horses. Just, if you take out the fact that it's Anderson Silva and Israel Adesanya, and you put in 2 other guys, and they had the same exact fight, you guys would not even be talking about that fight anymore. So let's get that straight first. With that said, he did show a lot of good things in that fight against Israel Adesanya. He was able to land a lot of good shots. He showed that he was still able to, kind of master the range. But against an explosive and strong fighter like Jared Cannonier, it's hard for me to see how Anderson Silva pulls off the victory here. Cannonier, minus 150-ish right now, with Anderson Silva around plus 135, plus 140. It's hard to trust Anderson Silva here. I don't know how people are going to be able to comfortably put money on Anderson Silva against a younger, more powerful and faster striker than Jared Cannonier at this moment. But I think that Anderson Silva just, he wants to fight in front of his home crowd, and this might actually be his last fight, and it would be nice for him to have his last fight in Rio de Janeiro. So maybe that's why they have him in the co-main event spot, and why they have him against a guy that, people think he could possibly beat. But the guys like Jared Cannonier has lost to, those losses have been to guys like Dominic Reyes, who has just been looking freaking phenomenal as of late. To say what you want about the Uzdemir fight, Jan Blachowicz, he employs more of a grappling heavy game plan against Jared Cannonier, which is definitely something Anderson Silva will not be doing. Glover Teixeira, same thing, implemented more of a grappling game to defeat Jared Cannonier. So it's hard for me to see Anderson Silva actually trying to go for takedowns and control Jared Cannonier in those situations, because I think that Cannonier, you got to remember, this guy was fighting a heavyweight way back in the day, and has slowly eventually cut down to 185, and I think that he is going to have the strength advantage here, and it's going to be tough for me to see how Anderson Silva gets this fight to the ground. So I'm going to take Cannonier. It pains me to say this, but I'm going to say by 3rd round KO, or 2nd round KO, and it's going to be an unfortunate farewell for Anderson Silva here, but I got Cannonier by 3rd round KO. Not a fight that I'm really looking to bet either, because I bet Cannonier in the past and it's really burned me, and I don't want it to come back and burn me once again. All right, main event time, the last fight that most of you are here for, Jessica Andrade against Rose Namajunas. This is probably the best strawweight fight that they could put together by far. We don't need to see Ioana and Jacek against Rose Namajunas 3. But Jessica Andrade, mini Lineker, I call her, or female Lineker, I already have a bet on her. I've already bet 1.5 units on Jessica Andrade at minus 117. I thought the line, I have a lot of people out there that think that Jessica Andrade will eventually get to plus money. I don't think so. the best line you can get on Andrade as of right now, it's 5 p.m. on a Monday, is minus 120 at Bet Online. I just don't see that line getting any better. So, in terms of these fighters themselves, Jessica Andrade is coming off a beautiful knockout victory over Karolina Kavakovic in her last fight. Like I said at the top of the podcast, that's a fight that Jessica Andrade definitely did not need to take. She could just sit out there and wait for Rose Namajunas to get her shit together so they can eventually book this fight. We had odds on this fight for a long time in advance. However, Rose just needed her time. So Jessica Andrade went out there and just knocked a bitch out in Karolina Kavakovic within 2 minutes of that first round. Before that, she completely dummied Tisha Torres, dummied Claudia Gadelha, and then had that loss to Joanna and Jacek. So a lot of people might point to that fight, the Joanna and Jacek fight, as to why Rose Namajunas should win this fight. It's tough for me because I went back and watched the Karolina Kavakovic fight against Rose Namajunas, and it seemed like Rose was very hesitant, or was not the same fighter in terms of what she's been showing as of late, which makes sense. It was 4 fights ago where she fought Karolina, but when she's on her back foot, it's really tough for her to get things off. And I think in a fight against Jessica Andrade here, she is going to be on the back foot quite often. I could see Rose landing a couple good shots, being the more technical fighter there, and having the tighter, crisper, straighter punches. The 1-2 is going to be very important here for her. The front kick is going to be very important for her to keep Jessica Andrade on the outside as much as possible. It would absolutely mystify me and blow me away if Rose Namajunas is able to land a shot that would put Jessica Andrade on her butt and knock her out, or potentially follow up with some sort of submission and knock her out, and submit her. I don't expect that to happen at all. I expect Jessica Andrade to be pushing forward from bell to bell, and I think that it's going to eventually break Rose Namajunas. Andrade is going to land a big enough shot to put Rose on skates, and then Andrade will eventually follow up with heavy shots and get the TKO. People want to pick apart Andrade's game due to the fact that she has that John Lineker Vanderlei style where she just puts her head down and just swings forward and just goes berserk. But it's shown to be effective. Like Joanna Jędrzejczyk is the only woman that's really not been able to hold up against, and we show that Joanna does decent when she's being backed up and still able to land her pot shots and her front kicks and all that. I just don't see Rose being able to have the same success. And MMA, we all know this. MMA math does not work. Just because Rose Namajunas beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk twice does not automatically mean that she's going to be able to beat Jessica Andrade here. There is absolutely a possibility I could see where Rose Namajunas is able to land enough shots throughout 25 minutes to get a decision victory. She has the footwork and the head movement and the boxing ability to negate some of these big shots from Jessica Andrade, but I still think that Jessica Andrade will land the big enough shots throughout these fights, throughout these rounds, and one of them might be significant enough to actually hurt Rose enough, where Jessica Andrade could follow up and get the TKO finish. This is 5 rounds that you got to stay away from Andrade, and I don't know how much 5 rounds is really going to have an issue for Andrade. She went to 5 rounds with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and she didn't really slow down significantly in that 5th round. So I don't expect her to slow down significantly here either. I am going to go with Jessica Andrade, and I did bet her 1.5 units at minus 117. If you are confident that you think more people will bet on Rose as the week goes on, I would highly suggest just waiting it out and see if you can get Andrade around that minus 115 to minus 120 range again. But I do think this is a fight for her to win. First, before I even finish this, let's really commend Rose Namajunas for even taking this fight in enemy territory. We all know what her mental state is like. She is very easily shook. But in this fight, she's going against probably the scariest woman that she could fight in her home country, against one of the most ravaging crowds that you could possibly go against. So big ups to Rose Namajunas for even accepting this fight and accepting the location of it. But unfortunately, I think that we're going to see her title reign come to an end, and we see Jessica Andrade walk out of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, as the new strawweight champion and probably hold the belt up there for a little bit. That's probably the best thing to happen for Joanna Jędrzejczyk, if I'm going to be honest, because we know she has a win over Andrade already, so that's probably Joanna's ticket to get back into a title shot, maybe get the belt again if she beats Andrade, and then possibly hook up another fight with Rose the third time around to eventually, maybe avenge one of those two losses that she already has to Rose. But UFC 237 will be Jessica Andrade's night, and she will leave the champion. So as of right now, I have 3 bets. My first one was the lock of the night play, which is Irene, Aldana, and Clay Guida, 5 units at minus 146. Second play is my dog of the night play is 1 unit on Sergio Moraes at plus 120. And then lastly is just a normal, regular bet, 1.5 units on Jessica Andrade at minus 117. With the fight doesn't go to decision props and the inside the distance props coming out, it's something that I'm going to be looking at, and there are some very intriguing spots, especially when I was going through this podcast. So it's something that I might look into a little bit more. So make sure you guys keep your eyes peeled on my Twitter timeline at MMA LOTN for any further thoughts and any further possible bets I will have for this card. But I think that's pretty much about it. We finished up LFL Season 6 last week. My man Danny V was able to get the victory with Dan Henderson. The Cinderella story, number 6 going into the playoffs, and then eventually came out the victor, beating up a Nick Diaz in the last round. And then, as I said, throughout LFL Season 6, LFL Season 7 will actually be you guys competing against each other in the same LFL format, league, regular season, playoff style, and then you guys try to compete for that cash prize at the end of it. So make sure you guys hit me up, and I'll make sure to give you guys as much information as possible. We're trying to push it as much as possible. I've seen so much interest out there for something like this, and now I'm trying to actually do it full blown. So let's see where we can take it. But yeah, man, that was fun. So we were just talking into your phone for an hour compared to actually having the camera in front of you, as I'm used to being in a Big Rob studio. But that's pretty much about it. So again, keep your eyes locked on my MMA Lock the Night Twitter for more possible bets for UFC 237. Until then, good luck. Good luck with your preparations, and I shall be back with the tape index at the end of this week for UFC Rochester, which is the next event, headlined by Kevin Lee and Rafael Dos Anjos. But until then, good luck, and I hope everybody profits unless you're betting against me.